All right, we're live. All right. So, hi everybody, and welcome to another live. I am here with Tatyana. We did a live a couple weeks ago now. I guess Tatyana that it was that we did on divorce and finances and what you needed to know. If you are divorcing and what that meant for what do we do? Quadros, retirement accounts, capital gains, and what you need to know for that. So we're heading into tax season. So today we thought we would do a live on getting divorced, and it's tax time. So, what do you consider in filing taxes? And so Tatyana, give a little bit of background on this. If you were married, what's the cutoff date? So for filing your taxes for 2020, what is the cutoff date for being able to choose between married filing joint, married filing separate, or whether you file single or head of household?
You can choose that up until you file. So if you file your taxes this week, you could choose that for last year. So a lot of people choose married filing separate over married filing joint because they got separated during the previous year. So in this case, it would be 2020. So they automatically think they need to go and file married filing separately. But that may not always be the best choice. Just because you got separated, you could still file married filing jointly. And if you can get along to get through this process, it's typically more beneficial, especially if there's children involved.
All right, so what are some of the benefits? And we were just talking about this before we went live, and because there are some downfalls and some things that you lose when you do married filing separate. So what's the benefit versus the loss that you get for married filing joint and married filing separate?
So especially if you have children and if there is tuition in college tuition, that's a big loss potentially if you do married filing separate. Child tax credit could be a loss, reduced if you do married filing separate. Those are the two biggies. And also your deduction, it's $12,000 per person. So when you do it together, you get $24,000, and that's often significantly greater than if you're going to do it separate.
Right. So those are some pretty huge considerations when you're looking to file taxes with your spouse or your ex-spouse from the 2020 taxes, because that could be a huge difference in the tax return, or even considering whether or not you have to pay, right, depending on where those numbers lie. So just to kind of go over what you just said, so the tuition, so whether the person themselves, the party, or their children are in college, if you do married filing separate, you do not get to claim your tuition deduction and or your student loan interest. That was one that I learned, as well as I'm paying on student loans, that you lose the student loan interest deduction. So that could be a huge one. And then the child tax credit, if you do married filing separate, you actually lose that child tax credit. And then, as you said, it is cut in half for the standard deduction that is taken for families, that they receive a standard deduction of 12,000 compared to 24,000 and some change when filing together. What are some other, is there any other ones? And so we talked about maybe a lesser one that's not as common, but the adoption credit that you would lose if you are married filing separate.
Yeah.
And in addition, smaller IRA contribution deductions, right, if they do married filing separate. All right. So, it may make sense, right, for somebody to come to you and have you almost run it both ways, right, to really look at the pros and cons and consider, look, if you file together, here's what it's going to be, and then splitting that tax return, equally, or however it is decided to split that between the parties, versus what is it going to be married filing separate. So.
Yeah, it's typically most of the time it's always going to be better to do married filing jointly. Right. So if you can get along to get through this process, you're going to be benefiting yourselves. Yeah. The other thing this year, unlike other years, there's the complication of the stimulus. I just literally 10 minutes ago had a client, and last year they filed joint. This year they're filing separate. But this year we have to do a rebate credit recovery accounting on every single person. So it's calculating it for both of them in her return. But that's not correct. So there's just going to be a lot of stimulus issues for people, methods that are going to get created for people who filed jointly last year are filing separately this year because the stimulus was calculated on the last year's return, but it's being accounted on this year's return. So it's just going to be a little messy with the stimulus as well.
Right. So if you filed joint the previous year and got a stimulus, it may make sense again to file joint one more time because you have to account for that stimulus check that you got. So
exactly.
And I can just give everybody from personal experience, I know that, you know, it seems like this is just almost kind of nitpicking little things here and there, but I can tell you from personal experience that it is a huge swing in what you could potentially get because when so I'm not legally married to my current husband. So I say my husband, but we're not legally married. But as we were talking about and discussing getting married, one of the things that came up was the tax issues, right? Because if we did married filing joint, then his income would count towards my student loan payment, right? And would affect my income-based repayment options that I have on my student loan. So that's another thing to consider from the flip side of it, right? If you're paying on student loans, his income would count. But if we did married filing separate, his income would not count. So I could still qualify for the income-based repayment. But like you said, I would lose all of those deductions, right? So I lost the student loan interest and the earned income credit, which actually at the time that we were talking about that, I didn't know that you lost all of those types of deductions. So I did an experiment for myself and I ran it on TurboTax both ways, right? So I ran it under married joint and married filing separate to see what the swing would be. And believe it or not, it was a huge swing. It went from like that year, I think I got like a $4,000 return. So if it was married filing separate, I would have had to pay almost $700.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's a huge difference. So
it could be very big, especially on the different incomes of sometimes there's a severe discrepancy, like one spouse makes a lot and one spouse makes less. And the wider the gap, the more you'll see things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So hopefully then we've given everybody something to think about as they're going into a time to file their taxes and they're in the middle of a divorce or even just after a divorce, because even if your divorce decree said, hey, we're going to do separate taxes or whatever, you know, you still can make agreements to file together if that makes more sense for you and your family and your children. So it's certainly something, if you're able to come together and look at it to consider together. So Tatyana, any final words for anybody who's watching?
Just, there's a lot of emotion when it goes through divorce and every little thing. Just try to put those aside to help both of you financially, and not just your taxes, but all the other parts of a divorce. When it comes to the finances, there's just so much entangled. Be kind to each other and untangle as easily as possible so that both of you benefit the most.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. So Tatyana, how can somebody reach you if they want to get in contact with you?
443-622-1226.
All right, great. And so thanks everybody for tuning in again. I'm Shiobhan Olivero, Florida licensed attorney and certified divorce coach, attorney only in Florida, divorce coach anywhere and everywhere that you can possibly be in this world. My information's on the screen, 813-501-7721. Or if you're watching this on my Facebook page, Tatyana's also tagged in it, so you can reach either of us from this Facebook page where you can reach out to us and send us a private message or contact us by one of those methods. So thanks everybody, and Tatyana and I will see you again soon with another financial planning and divorce issues that come up. So we'll talk to you soon.